Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for episode 529 with Dr. Daphne Scott. I think you'll dig this conversation because Daphne is thought-provoking about what matters and how to navigate your relationship between time and money and career and more. So you'll learn 1, how your ambition is sabotaging your career. 2, how to end the vicious cycle of stress. And 3, how to easily fit meditation into your daily routine. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items we've referenced, they're at awesomeatyourjob.com/F529. Now, here's Daphne's story. Dr. Daphne Scott brings 2 decades of real-world coaching and corporate development experience to her work with organizations, teams, and individuals. She combines strong leadership abilities with highly trained facilitation skills to bring individuals and teams into greater relationship, creativity, and ultimately success. Daphne is a certified mindfulness meditation teacher, a professional coactive coach, a certified Hendricks coach, a founding member of the Conscious Leadership Group, and a member of the International Coaching Federation. She holds a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. By the way, I think I want to go get one of those. And a doctorate of science in physical therapy from Andrews University. Daphne is the Chief Culture Officer at Confluent Health and was previously the Director of Leadership Development at Athletico Physical Therapy. Big thanks to Daphne for spending some time with us, and big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. Now, here's Daphne. Daphne, thanks so much for joining us here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Pete. It's my pleasure.
Well, I'm excited to dig into this conversation as well as learn a bit about your sketch comedy touring past. What is the story here?
Yeah. Well, I like to say that's almost where it all started. It's not actually the total place where it all started, but I did improvisational theater at the famed Second City in Chicago for quite a while, about three to 4 years, and then went on to travel with a sketch comedy group that traveled around the United States, and we'd do all kinds of festivals and, write funny sketches and think we were just hilarious. And yeah, that's when it all started. And that translated into many of my skills that I have in facilitating groups now.
Well, I'm curious, was there a particular sketch that just was the hit? Like, it got more laughs than the others.
Yes.
Not that you can perform the whole thing for us, but maybe give us a taste. What was the premise?
Yeah, there were 2 that were really big hits. One was called Amish Pornography.
Oh,
And by the way,
unique.
I need to give acknowledgement to Nick DeGrazia, who was the founder of the group, The Comic Thread. Amish Pornography, which was the theme song to Space Odyssey 2000. So boom, 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 the whole thing. And it was just simply two people. It was him and myself, and we're dressed up as Amish sort of folks. And we're just simply, he is removing his suspenders very slowly. And all I'm doing is lifting up my skirt about a half inch at most while this whole song plays all the way through. So it's literally us just standing on stage facing each other in this elaborate, much elaborate sort of setup of this Amish barn. And that was always a really big hit because we didn't say anything. We really weren't doing anything. But it was just this idea that this would be really what Amish pornography kind of would look like if you could.
Oh, it's clever.
It was very clever.
Risque.
Yeah, very, very risque. And then there was another sketch which was based on the movie Braveheart, and it was about this grandfather who was very obsessed with the movie, so much so that he thought it was real, and it just culminates in this great hijinks of him torturing his grandson. And it was very, very funny. So those are a couple. Yeah.
Mercy. Well, I love comedy that's just a little bit out there. And I think Key and Peele, in my personal opinion, are the most amazing sketch comedians I've bumped into. Netflix has a new series, I Think You Should Leave, which is a sketch comedy show. And it's amusing, it gives me some chuckles.
I have not watched it yet. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so let's talk about your modern day programming, or what you're up to these days. You got some stuff called Waking Up a Leader. What's sort of the main thesis or point behind this?
Yeah. So it's I like to say my latest book. It's my only book, but it is my latest book. So,
clever.
Yeah.
Your first book.
It's my first book, also my latest book. Yeah. So Waking Up a Leader is really the essence is this combination between the transformational skills that leaders and, by the way, people who want to be great at their jobs need to have on board, as well as the skills, some of the transactional skills that are really helpful for leaders to have on board. And it's specifically about looking at how we relate to sort of these 5 domains of our life, which seems to be these areas, especially in work, that can take over. So the 5 relationships that we're having are our relationships to time, money, ourself, our identity, how we see ourselves, friendships, and then, of course, the very well-known unknown, how we relate to the space of the unknown. So that's really what the book is about at its root.
Intriguing. Well, I love a good framework, breaking that into 5 key ingredients. And so I understand in your own story, you had some relationships that seemed a bit out of whack. Can you share your tale?
I did. Yeah, so good. That's a really nice way to say it, out of whack. Absolutely. Well, I started, when I wrote the book, really started with, in terms of the 5 relationships, the relationship to time. That's always a big one with clients I worked with and with myself. I had much the same experience that all of us have had, which is, feeling often as though I never had enough time. I never had enough time to do the things I really wanted to do. I didn't have enough time to play my guitar. I didn't have enough time to write comedy, these sorts of things that I enjoy doing outside of my working world. And then, of course, never had enough time to get my work done. That was one big relationship that had to change. If I got really to the root, though, what was happening was really, there was this particular way that I just was relating to how I saw myself in the world, who I believed that I was, and also who I believed I needed to be successful. And I needed to be a person who had no less than 50 responsibilities at any one time. I needed to be a person who ran from thing to thing and got more degrees and more certifications and took on more responsibility and all these sorts of things that I had created in my mind, by the way, as these marks of being successful. And ambition took over. And so my story progresses slow, a little bit through the book. And I really had to work to shift that relationship at the root. That was really what was happening. And it's intentional that the relationship to the self and the identity is in the middle of the other 4 in the book, by the way. Because I really discovered that's what was going on the whole time.
Boy, yeah. So intriguing. So you felt like you didn't have the time to do the things you really wanted to do, from the guitar to the comedy. And what the holdup there was, you had some ambition going on that said that you needed to tackle X, Y, Z. So can you really zoom in there in terms of sort of what's going on in the experience of your life and the feelings there in terms of frustration or overwhelm, etc., as well as sort of the internal dialogue that's kind of propagating that.
Yeah. Oh man, so good. You're getting right at it, Pete.
Oh, thank you.
So I'll just kind of talk about I love what you said, the internal dialogue, because this is really what at the core is what's happening for all of us is if we've paid attention long enough, and this is really the beginning of the book, if we pay attention long enough, we start to realize that we're giving a lot of attention to thought, that's happening, the things that we're telling ourselves. Really, there's a whole part in the book around the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So when I looked at how I was organizing myself in my life, and by organizing, I mean sort of my energy, my time, my thought processes, how I was taking care of my physical body, my emotional, mental, spiritual well-being, and I was really wiring that all together. It was based on sort of these root sort of experiences or these ideas. One that I had, first of all, let's just take this, that I have to be an ambitious person to be successful, that I had to take on a lot more work. And what was starting to happen was when I really paid attention to my experience, I was really creating sort of this idea that, one day I would arrive, one day I would finally get there. I'd finally reach the finish line. Which is really at the root underneath all that is this idea that things are permanent, that I would finally get the title or the promotion or the money, or one day I would finally have all the time that I wanted. And then I could be happy. Then I could relax. And the idea that even once you had those things that they would stay permanent is really, it's it's really the root, if you pay attention to all of our suffering, it's really sort of the core that we're going to finally get this thing. Then and only then can we finally be happy. And then when we have it, that it'll last forever. And once I saw the truth of that, that was years and years and years, by the way. I make it sound like it just, one day it happened. But once I started seeing the truth of that, I started unhooking myself and having a different relationship, right, with myself. I started relating to this idea of time differently. I started relating to this idea of money. That was a big one. I don't know how much you've encountered, the idea that people, you can't leave your current job that you're making so much money at and go find another job that could pay you just as much. You have to stay in your current job because if you leave, you'll be broke. So you can stay familiar but miserable. And I had to really, was really working through that relationship. And so the more that I kept paying attention to what I was really telling myself, the more that I kept paying attention to my feelings and how also transient they were. One minute I could be really feeling great, happy. The next minute I could be not so happy. And I started realizing, wow, maybe these things that I'm blaming on the outside of me, maybe there's more going on the inside that I need to pay attention to.
Well, that's intriguing. So then the lie is, hey, one day I'll have X and then it'll be all gravy from there on out. I'll have it, it'll be there, it'll be permanent, and happy days are here. Yeah. So that's sort of the falsehood that you're entertaining and it's causing some troubles.
Totally.
And so how would you articulate the contrary truth in terms of, how is it really and how should we really optimally operate?
Yeah, well, great question. So it's tricky in a way because there's the inherent reality, inherently things that are true, but they're not inherently true, right? So it is true on one level that it's good to have some cash. Like if you're going to have a business and we want to have a job, and it is true that that's good. We probably keep the lights on. Probably that's
sure.
Not true. And there's some truth to money, right? I mean, I'd sound like a complete crackpot if I was on your show right now and be like, look, money's not real. It's just that it's not inherently real. It's not the thing that's going to ultimately one day get you the peace, calm, joy that you ultimately desire, that people are really looking for in their life. And so when we really look at the idea of money, there's some truth to it. It's reality. When we look at time, it'd be weird if I was like, oh, the time doesn't, why don't concern yourself with time. It doesn't really exist. There is a clock. There is that we had an appointment today, right? Like it's helpful. But if I start to believe that it's inherently true, that that's all there is, and I start wiring my life around that, I really start to create a lot of suffering for myself because the clock just does what the clock does. It's a convention. It's helpful to a certain degree, but time and space are really in the inherent reality. They're not dependent on the clock. So how I choose to relate to that clock really actually sets up my experience. I can, be sitting quietly reading my book and, feeling really, really great about everything. I can also be quietly reading my book and feel really stressed out and overwhelmed. Same exact thing on the video camera, but very different experience, right?
Intriguing. So how you choose to relate to these things makes all the difference in terms of how you're feeling and operating and your ability to be effective, in your job and more broadly as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So can we dig in then in terms of what are some best practices and worst practices in terms of relating to each of these, 5 key things?
Yeah, such a great question. And this is where the transactional part of it, sort of what sounds very transactionally, transactional sounding, fits into this whole thing. So I really, really love the question. So let's talk about time. Yeah, totally true. Time we use it. It's a convention. The clock is a convention. I don't have to feel at the effect. 1 o'clock is no different than 3 o'clock. It's not doing anything to me sort of idea, right? That sounds great, right? It also helps, though, if you know how to put stuff on your calendar. It also helps if you do some planning week to week. And what I really like to tell people is when I sit down and I review my calendar 2 weeks out, for example, review my lists. I work from a list every day, and this is one of the actions in the book. I really see that as a mindfulness practice. Because I know that when I do that thing, when I review that calendar, when I have my lists up to date and I'm keeping track of things and I know what's coming, I relax. My mind is clearer. Even if I have a day full of appointments, when I've looked at that on Friday, it's not going to have until Wednesday. I know okay, these are the things I need to be prepared for. These are the things that I'm planning, that are coming. Even looking back on the calendar, for example, a week can be really helpful. There might be meetings. I'm like, I didn't grab that one. I told that guy I'd get him that thing and I didn't write that down. I need to write it down. So we really start to relax. And so I think that is one around the experience of time. That is one of the key practices that if people really are willing to just, slow down to go fast type of idea, right? It really starts to shift our relationship and how we experience things.
And the practice is simply maintaining your calendar and a list of things. And so that sounds like a prudent thing to do. And so what would you say many astute professionals do instead of that's causing them problems?
Yeah, so good. That's just so great. So let's see how this fits together, right? So imagine this. Imagine if believing that you don't have enough time. I mean, I'm sure you've had that experience before, right? You don't have enough time. And you're starting to believe that. Now, if you already start to believe that you don't have enough time and that's like your operating system, what's it like to think that you're going to sit down and review your task list in your calendar?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Exactly. Like you're like, I don't have enough time to do that. I just have to get things done. And so people are playing whack-a-mole. They're not grounded in what really requires my attention right now, what's really most important right now. And they spend an awful lot of time, sort of rethinking things because you didn't have it written down, or you're having to go back and, sort of replan the thing that you're going to do next. So that's what I watch professionals do and this is where I think where the mindset and the understanding of our attention and how we train ourselves to pay attention and how we work with the mind, where that fits in with a very practical thing that, that we just talked about, which it's not really rocket science, right? Like review your calendar. But when you get these two things working again, kind of sort of working against each other in a way, it creates a ton of stress for people. So, that's really how this starts to wire, to sort of congeal itself into creating a lot of overwhelm and not the best practices for folks.
I see. So I sort of like a vicious cycle in terms of I don't have time. I need to go ahead and do this thing. And thusly they don't take the time to, plan and set up the calendar and the list. Right. And then things get all the more out of control. And so is it a similar kind of a pattern with the other 4 relationships can you maybe show us how that plays out with them? Yeah.
So, there's sort of these common myths, these sort of mindsets that we get into. Let's take money, for example. And this is probably one of my favorite ones, honestly, because I work with very successful people and, it's fascinating to me. And I ask them, how much money do you need? Well, seems like a reasonable question. And none of them have an answer.
That's fascinating. I want to dig into this for a bit just because I know exactly how much money I need. And
yeah, me too.
And so I guess, I don't know, I sort of thought that was something that people who were interested in growing wealth knew. But so tell me a bit more about this. So you've got dozens of clients, you've asked them this question and zero have told you a number?
Yeah, so they struggle to have a number. And what's really sort of lurking underneath all of that is in some instances, they've had enough for a really long time. And it really starts to back them in a corner mentally, sort of in a way, because they start to see like, wow, if I have all the money that I say I needed and that I wanted, right, then why am I not spending more? So we'll go back to time, spending more of my time living my life the way that I'd really like to live it.
As opposed to spending time to generate more wealth.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. Which is fine. But that's not in and of itself a problem. But exactly, it's sort of the way they relate to it. And so the common myth that we all start to believe is that we need more. We need more money will ultimately make us happier. More money. And by the way, when you get as much as you need and want, then you get to play the game of your fear of losing all of it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So you're never settled. You're never settled. Right. And so, so we'll look at that. So you start getting into this mindset around this, and this starts to drive that quest for more, that quest for greed, which lends itself to everything from people not spending time with their families, people, not taking care of themselves, their physical well-being because they're working all the time, to really horrific sorts of things like creating fraud, defrauding people in the company, stealing, all these sorts of things that we've read about in the news, right? And so when we have sort of this relationship with money that the only way we'll be happy is we have to have more, we're not clear. We don't have clarity around what is enough. What is enough? Individually, and then even in our businesses, what does that need to look like? Leaders really, and people in their lives really get swept away then with this constant, we're on this treadmill all the time, and we're never going to get there. So it creates a lot of stress for people.
Well, Daphne, can I really put you on the spot here?
Yeah, totally.
When you talk about what is enough, can you share, for us personally, as you've thought through these things a lot, what is enough time, money, self, friends, unknown for you and why?
Yeah. Well, enough time for me really lives in spending my time the way that I truly, that it's truly in line with my values and my purpose. And I want to tell you again, it's not a straight line. I think these, in my experience, and I feel like, I live in my genius 95, if not 100% of the time with my work, but it's not a straight line. People are asking me to do things all the time, different things that, by the way, would be great to, I wish I had the space to just say yes to everything, right? on some level. But then there's the part where I know it's not mine to do. And I had to really work through in my life, getting very good at saying the word no. And I know if I go do it, my energy level won't be that great. It ultimately won't bring me the fulfillment that I really can have, know that I can have. And once you start having that in your work, it becomes it's pretty palpable when you're not doing it. So no matter what, when it comes to time, what I know is that I'll never have enough time to do the things I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I start aligning myself with doing a lot of things that I don't want to do, we just become more and more unhappy. There's that. Around money. So what's enough? What's enough time? I have all the time in the world to do the things that I want to do. I never, feel constricted around that. Around money, it really was a matter of looking at what's the wealth that I know I want to have to live a reasonable life and to be able to obviously pay my bills. Now, my lifestyle is a little different. I don't have children, by the way, so that changes some things. For
sure.
People who have kids, you have more responsibility in that way. But it was really a matter of setting up my life so that, quite frankly, where work wasn't costing me more money. And I think when we start looking at life in that way, when I understood that the place that I was spending my time, how I was doing my work was really my energy, my life energy. And it was the only energy I had, right? It's the most valuable thing that I do have. How do I really want to be, quote, spending that? And is there cost on the back end that I'm not paying attention to? And then on average, they say, the research says that once you hit about 80 to 90,000 a year, your positive emotion, access to positive emotion doesn't really increase that much, even up against people who are, multimillionaires. And so I really started to look at that and I'm like, what is it for me to live my life in a way that can really allow me to retire early, quote early, right? To have some financial independence. And what does it look like for me to set my life up that way so that I have more flexibility around my time and my money? I'm not in debt. I'm not, walking around with, the most heavily marketed product and outside of crappy food in the United States is credit. What's it like to just not be living like that? And so I really started setting up my life that way and realized how much money, when you choose to live on less money, guess what happens to your retirement account? You need less.
Well, certainly, yeah.
Right. Oh, you don't need as much. So yeah. And then, around my ambition and what that needed to really look like and where was I, out of integrity with myself, meaning where I wasn't in wholeness and driving myself in a certain way where I'd gained 30 pounds. My relationships were really falling apart. I even make this comment in the book, like I had all these great degrees and certifications, but all my plants were dead, and taking care of things in my life and not keeping friendships intact, both at work and, in and out of work. I think one of the things I really landed on was that, I was spending and still do spend a good deal of my energy, my life energy working. And I love it. And to think that you only have acquaintances at this place where you spend 40 or 50 hours or 60 hours a week, that gets pretty dry. And so what was it to really understand and to live into, like really cultivating friendships and keeping track of people and not just seeing people as sort of a means to an end or, I'm just going to help me get my job done and then I'm going to go home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was all of them except the unknown.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. Well, the unknown really, the thing that I landed on with the unknown really has a lot to do. Are you ready? Here's almost sounds like the buzzkill of the show, but really has a lot to do with death. I really got in touch with the reality that it's coming. I just don't know when, but it is coming. And I had a meditation that I was taught by one of my teachers, Stephen Batchelor, and this is in the book, but it really is taking a close look at and really sitting in this question that given that is unknown, given that it is known that I will one day take my last breath. I will one day have taken my last walk. I will have one day pet my dog, for the last time. Given that is true, but given that I don't know when that is, now what should I do? And that was really the meditation that started to unhook me quite a bit from being sucked into that myth that things were permanent, kind of letting me get outside of myself a little bit to realize that this whole thing that I'm doing and existing isn't just about me. It's just like other people matter, other people are here. And so given that, what should I do? Is it going to be about me just accumulating more ambition, more degrees, more, knowing that this is all going to come to an end? Or is there some other way that I might want to be organizing my energy and spending my time, for lack of a better, which is finite in that regard, for lack of a better explanation. So it was all these things together, how we relate to all these things together. And interestingly enough, these are the things that I kept watching my clients struggle with. It was the same sort of thing. And I'd get in these coaching conversations, I'd be like, wow, I get it. I too have had these struggles.
Well, and I'm intrigued that, so when you do that meditation, so given the fact that I'm going to die, therefore, what shall I do?
And given the fact that I don't know when that is.
Yeah.
Right.
What sorts of action items tend to pop up over and over again for yourself and others when they engage in this?
Yeah, it's great. One, it's interesting because I've been doing that meditation for years. And one interesting thing, I think you'll find this very curious because I find it curious. When you sit in it, the idea is just to let any answers that come to you. And sometimes nothing, phenomenal shows up. It's just, you're just kind of doing your meditation. But one thing that does consistently pop up for me is the word rest. It's sort of, and how it lands is not like rest, like go take a vacation. It's more like a resting with what is. It's more like a call to be with what is, which I think is probably a balance to my personality type, which the unconscious sort of part of my personality type is to want to be in control. It's wanting to make sure that things are going to happen. It's wanting to, have things turn out the way I think they should, right? And so there's more of this theme of rest, be with what is right now, and more of this call for stillness, being still. And even in the midst of activity, having a sense of stillness, even in the midst of us having a conversation, having the sense of stillness, that there isn't something that I have to make happen or that has to happen in this moment. So that is a theme that comes up pretty reliably for me. And then there's real simple things like it could be, I've done the meditation and just a simple thing will pop up like, take care of your car. like there might have been something that I was avoiding doing, and it finally just says, look, it's time to go take action on this, and you don't have dragging your feet type of thing. So it runs the gamut for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so then we talk about rest. I'd love to get your take on, are there some particular self-care practices that really seem to have a lot of bang for your buck in terms of much rejuvenation and not a lot of time?
Yeah. Well, this comes back to time for sure and how we relate to it. But I will say that undoubtedly there are two things that we know really impact people's physical health. So if we start to recognize a few things I want to say about that leading up to it, if we start to recognize that the body, it's what allows this being over here to move around. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to nature. It will ultimately do what it's going to do. However, if we really start to look at what allows the body to really function well and to be in its best health, hands down, there are two things that have really been shown over and over again. The food that we eat really matters, and getting some sleep. and again, those aren't really sexy things, right? Like, we are looking for sort of always this like sort of magic bullet, this sort of one-stop shop type of thing. And for sure, in my own experience, when I am eating very healthy, meaning I'm staying away from processed foods, I'm staying away from foods that are, laden with sugar, processed stuff. They've pulled all the good nutrients out of it. You're eating out of a box kind of thing, staying away from that stuff, eating as healthy as you can, and getting, for me, it's about 7 to 8 hours sleep a night. Those two things really trump just about everything. Anything that I could do. And, the science really has shown us a lot, I think, over this especially this last 10 years or so, although the modern, sort of the media will try to grab all these weird sorts of things, but to try to tell you differently, but there's just no substitute for that, I think, with a physical body. And this fits into our mental and emotional well-being. The body and the mind work together. And so if we haven't, taken the physical being and we haven't, made sure that we're well rested and made sure that we've had plenty of sleep, we act real crabby. Like one of the examples I love to give is, and especially people who have kids really get this. So it's like, if you have a baby, let's say the baby's 1.5 years old, they're not really talking, they're nonverbal and they're crying. I'll ask these, ask people in group, like, tell me what your checklist is. Like, what do you go through, if your baby's crying? Like, what you're starting to try to, why is the baby crying? You have a checklist in your mind. And it's really great because parents will say things like, well, are they hungry? Do they need their diaper changed? Do they need to sleep? Do they need a nap? Do they need to move around? That's the other one, as far as the body's concerned, is getting regular movement. And I point out to people, I'm like, I don't know why we made this weird jump that just because we had a little body and then it became a big body, that we don't still need those same sort of basic things. We need to have good, right? We need to have good food. We need to get good sleep. We need to, be well hydrated, as part of taking care of the body. So I think that really is something, and I could go on all day about sleeping, but that is really really a significantly overlooked part of our health. For all the emphasis that we can put on exercise and all these other things, I think sleep is what I watch people really skip out on. And all you have to do is pay attention to how you feel after you've been sleep deprived for about 1 or 2 days. And we're just aren't in our best space. We're just not going to be. The body is really running on empty. So we really have to keep that gas tank full. And I think those are two of the big ones. And then the third, of course, that I'm a huge fan of is meditation. And learning how to pay attention, because I think that is really at the root when we can keep working with the mind, which is kind of, the mind is really all we have. When we can keep working with the mind and training the attention in a certain way and teaching it how to pay attention, then we're more skillful actually at noticing when things are getting off for us. We're more skillful at noticing, wow, I am feeling like I need a bit of a break here. And we can take action on things a little bit more clearly, and we're aware of how we're relating to things too. So I think those are the big three.
And when you say meditation, what do you recommend people do to get that practice up and going?
Yeah, a few things. There's a few. I will tell you, Headspace is probably one of them. If you're going to sort of go the app route to learn, I am a huge fan of Headspace. Andy Puddicombe is the guy that put that together. And it's just a great app. You can do 10 free sessions. And then, there's a nominal pay part to it that you can do. People can also access my meditations on Insight Timer. Insight Timer is a free application. And actually, there are hundreds of meditations on there and teachers too. And I have a very sort of a couple intro meditations that people can do. But I think any of those are really good places for people to start so that they can sort of be guided through a process. And then some people really like guided meditations and listening to them consistently. I kind of mix it up. I don't do as much guided. I do a lot more just silent meditation. And I'd like to say a word too about one of the other forms of meditation that we probably need to talk about a little bit more. We talk about being seated and meditating a lot. That's, I think, what most people imagine, right? But there's walking meditations, and you can meditate and walk. And I've even noticed in my own teachings when I'm working with people, I don't talk about that probably as much as I could, and probably should, because learning how to sit, most of us are just not used to being still that long, so that can take a little bit longer. Whereas I find if people learn how to meditate and how to do a walking meditation, that can be just as beneficial. And so you can use all these different postures, sitting, lying, walking, and be in those different positions, which I think is really good too. So Headspace, big fan. And my meditations are also on Insight Timer too. So.
And if we're doing a walking meditation, how does that go in practice?
Yeah. A couple ways to do it. One, the way that I teach is, and the reason I like this is because it doesn't take a lot of, you don't have to walk 5 miles, meditate. You can just do it in a space about 20 feet, long, which means that people can do it sort of in their office building or, in their place of work too. But you find a stretch, about 20 feet or so. And the basic premise is that you're putting your attention, and this is the basic premise with any meditation, but you're putting your premise on what it is that's really happening in that moment. And we really bring the attention to the feet because you're walking and noticing what each step actually is like. And noticing that my right heel is touching the ground. My right toe is lifting, ball of my foot is touching the ground. And then my left leg is moving, and really bringing your attention to all of those moment by moment nuances as you're just in this space of going from one side of the room, if you will, to the other side of the room, and then just simply turning and going back the other direction. And so the idea is just bringing the attention and awareness to, I'm stepping now, and this is the next step, and I'm doing that. And you're using the walking and the stepping and literally the foot making contact with the ground as the anchor, just like you might with the breath if you were using seated meditation.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Give it a shot. I think you'll like it. Yeah. It's pretty cool. If you haven't done it before, it's pretty cool. Yeah. It's a nice way to do it. And I think people really do enjoy it because you're moving, I think people kind of can feel a little constrained when they're sitting at first and then do a combination of them, which is great. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Daphne, tell me, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things?
No, I think that's good. I think we got through the whole point.
All right, good. Yeah. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
I love the quote. It comes from Aristotle, but how you do anything is how you do everything.
Thank you.
And I'm a really big fan of that quote. And I think because it brings me back to being mindful. It brings me back to being aware of how I'm organizing myself, how I'm moving through the world. And when I get on autopilot, I'm not paying attention, how I can be unskillful sometimes. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that quote. Yeah.
And how about a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to cite, there's two. I have 2 favorite research articles. I'm going to totally nerd out now. By the way, I was a physical therapist and did clinical research in my first, career. But one of my favorite articles was an editorial that was written by a pretty popular physical therapist at the time, Tony DeLito. And he wrote this article and it was basically titled Stop Looking for the Magic Bullet. And he was writing about treating low back dysfunction in the United States and how people were just trying to find this one cure-all. People could just take a pill and they'd be rid of all their back pain. However, that article really shifted my awareness of life in general, of how much time I was spending trying to find that magic bullet. And it was really what we were just talking about, Pete, around I'll finally be happy when, if only. And that article I think he wrote that I want to say it was 1998 or something. It might have been 2001, but that always stuck with me, even though it was very clearly around back pain. It was very clearly around, clinical science. the idea, the premise stuck with me for a really long time, even till now. And then the other study was done by Killingsworth, and it was on looking at how people are relating to what they're doing in the moment and if that really matters. The idea is that our minds wander all the time, and does it really matter? Does it matter if we're really present? Everybody tells us it matters, but how much does it matter? How much does it really impact our experience day to day? And so they did this amazing study where they did experience sampling, and they had these like over 2,000 subjects, and they gave them, it was an app on their phone, and they could interrupt them through the day and say, hey, what are you doing? Are you thinking about what you're doing? How much are you enjoying what you're doing right now? And so they just collected all these variables from these people. And what they found was pretty amazing, actually. First of all, this might not surprise you, but of course, when people were doing something that they enjoyed and they were fully present with it, they really enjoyed it. Interestingly enough, though, when they asked people, hey, what are you doing right now? Are you liking it? And people were like, nah, not so much, but how engaged are you with it? And they'd be like, fully engaged. And then they'd say, how much enjoyment are you getting? People reported just as high of positive engagement as they did when they were doing something that they actually enjoyed. And what they really found, and this I think really comes back to the premise of my book, is that it's when people were fully present with what they were doing, it didn't matter as much. The actual content of what they were doing wasn't driving how much well-being they were having in the moment. It literally was how present they were to what was happening that was really impacting the outcome of their enjoyment, positive emotion, and feeling engaged with what they were doing. So I thought that study was very, very telling about the importance of how present we are in our day-to-day actions and our day-to-day life, basically. Even when we might be having a difficult conversation with someone, the more present we are to it, the more benefit we can get out of it. So those are two of my favorite studies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how about a favorite book?
My favorite book, I would have to say, I'm going to cite this one, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Have you heard of this book or read this book?
I have not read this one. No.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So it is some of the most beautiful writings by Annie Dillard, some of the most beautiful writing I have ever read in a book. She opens up with this description of this tomcat that, she's living in sort of this kind of wooded shack type of thing. And this tomcat that comes into her room, and she just gives this amazing description of what this animal is like. What I really love about the book is she literally would just go and watch. She'd sit out on this rock, or she'd, go out into the woods, and she'd sit there and she would just watch the most simplest of things, like a bug crawling across the grass or the way the light was changing with the sun. And she would just write about it. She writes about it. And to me, the book is just so representative of what it is to be fully present and what it is to really notice the tiniest of things that we sort of don't give much attention to in our day-to-day existence. So it's one of my favorite books. I've read it like 4 times.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a leadership-y book, right?
Well, I guess in a way. In a way it is.
In a way, yeah.
And how about a favorite tool, something you use to be more awesome at your job?
Yeah, favorite tool. Well, I use, for my project and task management, I use the app Asana, Asana, and I am a huge fan of their approach. It's a flexible enough system. I practice from a productivity standpoint, task management, mindfulness of my stuff, David Allen's approach in getting things done. And that app works really well because it's flexible enough and lets you set things up that way. It has a great, project sharing tools. And they have the app on the phone where I keep track of things with my assistant. So I really, really like it. And that's pretty much my go-to for sure. Mm-hmm. Outside of my fancy pens, I do have some fancy pens that I like. But
oh, tell us. What brands? What do we get?
Well, I have a Mont Blanc pen that I really, really love. And it uses it's a fountain pen, but it has the cartridges in it instead of having to, old school put ink in it. And it's like my favorite. And it's black and it has a red cap. So Mont Blanc is, if I'm going to use a fancy pen, I will use that pen. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And how about a favorite habit?
Favorite habit, meditation for sure. And reading in the morning. My ritual in the morning is I wake up, I do get a cup of coffee. That's my favorite thing. And then I read for about 30 minutes and then I do my meditation for about 30 to 45 minutes every morning. So that's my ritual. Those are my favorite habits for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And is there a particular piece that you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
Yes. I think there are two. The biggest one was a statement I said earlier, which is, you always have all the time that you need to do the things that you want to do. That really lands for people. And you'll never have enough time to do the things you don't want to do. So that one really lands for people. And I think the other thing that really lands for people is when I really allow them the space to discover that nothing is permanent. That's a game changer. And once they realize that they're really trying to strive to keep things the same, hold on to the good times, keep away the bad times, which, by the way, isn't a horrible thing for us to be wired that way, right? But I think what really lands for people is when I'm really telling them and getting them to understand that they don't have to worry about the good times staying around or the bad times staying around, that nothing's permanent. So that seems to really resonate.
And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
I would point them to, they can go to my website, 3Ws, wakingupaleader.com. That's where they can find the book. Of course, the book is also on Amazon. And then they can message me there. And I also have a 10-week online leadership course too, that they might want to check out if they're interested in getting some of those really key critical skills to leading and living their life. It could be helpful.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah, I think my challenge that I would love to give to folks today to be awesome at their jobs is sit down once a week, clean up that list and take a look at that calendar. That would be the challenge. And sit down for once a week, 30 minutes and see what happens. Just give it a shot. Give it a try. Yeah, that'd be my challenge.
All right. Daphne, it's been fun. I wish you great luck when it comes to all the ways you're waking up and making it happen.
Yeah, thanks, man. This was super fun. I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks for having me on the show.
I've been really chewing on Daphne's quote that I'll never have enough time to do the things I don't want to do. And it really can be game-changing to reflect upon that if you are in a situation where, I should do that. Yeah, I guess I just got to find the time. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe what's more important is that you find the reason, the why, the motivation behind doing that thing, or you discover that that's something you're just going to let go of and you can just be free of that kind of feeling of stress or weight or obligation. So that's what's been striking me. Hope you found some similar gems. The show notes, the transcript, the links to items we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/Ep529. If you haven't already, I hope you'll push subscribe. You'll catch our next guest. We got Julie Morgenstern. We got a lifelong professional organizer of stuff and time sharing some of her pro tips. So I hope to catch you there. Peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.